In this video, we're going to talk about how to start a women's empowerment business. As someone who's had a women's empowerment business for 12 years, I can promise you I've got some actionable strategies that are really going to make a difference. So before we even get started on talking about how to build a women's empowerment business, I first want to commend you and applaud you for even asking the question and for caring and for wanting to start a women's empowerment business. The fact is, the world needs more women's empowerment. We need more women in power. And what that means is we need more women who are choosing their life, who are making decisions for themselves, who are generating and cultivating influence, generating income in order to reinvest and make an impact. Because research shows that when women have money and when women have power, everybody improves, everybody benefits. Women tend to invest more in their communities. They tend to give more to charity, and they just tend to, in general, invest more back into their families and the communities around them. So everyone wins when women get empowered. So the fact that you are considering starting a women's empowerment business, I am so excited for you. And just to be clear, so you don't go getting any ideas, when I talk about women's empowerment, it doesn't mean that women rise and men come down. It doesn't mean the disempowerment of men. It means that all of us become more empowered and that we appreciate the feminine and what the feminine brings to the table just as much as we appreciate the masculine. And it is my belief and my experience that as the feminine, as women become more empowered, then the masculine can also step into their natural role too, and we can both work together to uplift all of humanity. So the question is how to start a women's empowerment business. Well, first and foremost, as a business person, I'm going to immediately say that a women's empowerment business, just that broad term, is too general, too generic. The first and most important thing that I would recognize or recommend is that you consider what women, which women, what kind of women, what do you want to do specifically to empower them? Because a women's empowerment business in general is a very broad concept. And what I've found that works really well in business, especially if you're starting this on your own by yourself, is to narrow the focus. The answer to having something be really broad and general is to have a narrow and specific brand. So first and foremost, I'd ask you to think about what women do you want to serve and how do you want to serve them? And what is your unique gift and way that you want to serve them? And once you have clarity around who you want to serve, it's really important to dig into what their problems and challenges are. So a women's empowerment business might focus in on mothers, or it might focus in on mothers who are teachers. Now we're talking about a really narrow audience, right? So getting clear on the market that you wish to serve can also make it very clear what it is that market needs. So for example, you might want to empower girls in Africa, or specifically in Kenya. Specifically, when we look at that country and those girls, there might be a very specific set of needs of what you could provide for them, right? It might look very different than empowering elderly women in Florida, right? To start a second career or a third career or a fourth career. Getting really narrow and focused on which women you want to serve, I think will help you a lot to be able to find your market and tailor your message to that market. One of the best questions that anybody ever asked me was, what is your $1 million value? So when you're clear about who you're serving, sometimes you can get very clear very quickly about your $1 million value. And if you're unclear, perhaps starting with the question, what is your $1 million value? And then looking to see if that informs what the audience is that you can serve. So who do you serve and what is the $1 million value that you provide to that person? Now that doesn't mean that the services you provide have to cost $1 million or even have an outcome that's $1 million in revenues, but it could have a value that's that important. So for example, I remember when somebody asked me this question, what's your $1 million value? for the women's market. Specifically, I was like, well, I can help women speakers, authors, and coaches create millions of dollars of revenues from their events. Boom. I had my $1 million value, and now I had my target audience. So think about, who do you provide the most value to, and how could you provide that value to them? Which brings me to the second part of starting a women's empowerment business, and that's identifying the revenue streams, the business model that's going to generate money. Now, this is always a really sensitive topic when it comes to women's empowerment. And in fact, I personally had the experience of feeling like there was a disconnect between the fact that I wanted to serve the women's market and I wanted and needed to make money. And so back when I first started doing all this work around women's empowerment, I created an event called the Women's Success Summit. And the whole concept of the event was to help women start and launch their businesses and help them start to make money. The challenge was that those women generally were more resistant to investing in their own mentorship and personal development. So I kept putting together these events. P.S. Events are a great revenue stream. I kept putting together events for this audience that was essentially broke for a long time. And I did it because of a sense of wanting to serve this market, but not being strategic about whether I could be served by serving this market. So we want it to be a win-win. We don't want to empower others at the expense of empowering ourselves. So we need to make sure that strategically you're looking at, are there revenue streams that make sense, and can this audience afford to pay for what you're selling? So the business model is really relevant here. So a few ideas for business models and revenue streams that work really well for women's empowerment businesses are events. A lot of great women's empowerment events are out there already, and there's still plenty of room in the market for more. So how do you monetize events? Well, you can sell tickets, obviously, but for many years I tried to monetize my events just by selling tickets, and let me tell you that I was leaving a lot of money on the table and not serving people as well as I could. So ticket sales are one way. Sponsorships are another. Getting companies who want to align with the women's market and sell to the women's market is a great way to align your interests and generate revenues while creating a win-win situation. So back when I used to do the Women's Success Summit, we would have sponsors like car companies or banks or credit cards that wanted to serve the women's market, and they would pay us a fee in order to be featured at the event or have a table at the event or be able to get up on stage for 5 minutes and speak. One thing that's really important is that you choose sponsors that are aligned with your mission and your vision and your values, because a lot of times if you're just going after the money, you could end up with a sponsor that actually hurts the experience rather than enhances the experience. So another revenue stream from events are back-end sales. So from women's empowerment events, you could sell coaching and mentorship. You could sell memberships into organizations or associations. Now, I personally love memberships and subscriptions as revenue streams because they are, this is very important, monthly recurring revenues. So anything that's monthly recurring revenues is going to jump right to the top of my list in terms of what I would recommend. So I love the idea of having a big back end on the back end of any women's empowerment business that fosters more community, more connection, more co-creation by way of a membership. That's one of my favorite women's empowerment business models. Another thing that you can do to make money from a women's empowerment business is by becoming a women's empowerment speaker. Now, as a speaker, you can get paid to speak, and that is one way to go about monetizing speaking, but actually it's kind of the hard way, if you ask me at least. Personally, I like the model where I go out and speak and my clients go out and speak, and yes, they can get paid to speak, and they have offers that they can make on the back end of speaking for courses, for seminars, for events, for retreats, and for other products and services on the back end. So another great way to empower women and make money at the same time is by offering back end support services to support them in implementing the empowerment that you're sharing and teaching. So So the 3 things that I'd wish I'd known when I launched my women's empowerment business is, number 1, find models that allow you to have leverage. Now, leverage means that smaller inputs yield bigger outputs. So a non-leveraged business model is a one-to-one model where I'm selling my time for money and I constantly have to be hustling and selling in order to make a living. Not my favorite. So leverage involves, for example, having a business model that's a group model instead of a one-on-one model, or a business model where you can record something, create a course, and then sell it forever after you've created it. Leverage is very important. Monthly recurring revenues, we've talked about that. And finally, something that's scalable, something that can grow over time and that you can add more people to it without having to invest more time and energy in producing it. You really narrow down and get a real sense of what's the message that you want to share with the world. What's the message that you want to empower women with? What's the mission that you are out there to accomplish? Rather than just like, I'm here to empower women, it's like getting clarity on how you intend to do that. And is this something that women know that they want and need? Sometimes you might have something that you know everybody needs, but if they're not looking for it and they don't want it, it's going to be really hard to sell it. So consider framing whatever it is you're offering around something that they're already looking for. And then last but not least, make a plan. Make a business plan, a 1-year strategic roadmap, very, very simple, where you address who's your target audience, what are your revenue streams, what's your marketing strategy? How are you going to get this out there? Who's going to be on the team? What are you going to do in order to promote this product? All those things go into a 1-year strategic roadmap and a 90-day plan. What I've found for myself and with my clients is that it's often a lot easier to look at strategy and planning and execution in 90-day chunks rather than trying to create a big, long 5-year business plan. 90-day chunks. And if you need support with this, this is the work that we do. And we know a lot about launching and creating and growing women's empowerment businesses. If you want to get started and learn a little bit more about how we can help you, go and download my Monetize Your Magic playbook. You can get that by clicking on the link below, and it's free. And for those of you who are thinking, yeah, this is really juicy, and yes, I'd love to create my plan, know that this is the work that we do in our own retreats. So we run 3-day retreats 5 times a year where we basically bring people together, mostly women, to develop their business plan. So if that's something that interests you, let us know. You can find me online, you can reach out, and we'll set you up with a discovery call to find out if and how we can support you.